A lot of existential suffering comes from the inability to accept cognitive dissonances. Cognitive dissonance is what happens when you receive new information that contradicts with old information you already have. And as a human, you are very biased to what you already know, and it's not comfortable to update your beliefs. So you have a sense of cognitive dissonance where you pretend that a contradiction doesn't exist, like you pretend that two things are not contradictory and you believe at both of them at the same time, or you have a sense of unacceptability towards what you're seeing, and therefore you completely ignore new evidence that should update your belief systems. The difficult truth that non-duality points to is that multiple things are in fact true at the same time, but the cognitive dissonance you experience is the fact that you do actually not see that this is the case. So you might intellectually understand non-duality as some sort of ultimate truth where all of reality is one, but then personally not actually believe both sides of any given argument. For example, the classical problem that people struggle with is the debate between free will and determinism. Now, if you are truly understanding non-duality, you should be understanding that both are equally true. Free will and determinism are the same. There's absolutely no difference whatsoever. And this is extremely dissonant for anybody believing in either of those. Because now I'm telling you that both are actually the same when you have drafted clear distinctions in your mind. In one hand, the universe guides itself automatically and you have no choice at all. And on the other, you have all the choice and the universe is merely something that you manipulate and change. So in order to actually have a non-dual realization, you cannot fully have a distinction here. And this is just one example. Think about objective morality versus moral relativism. Think about materialism versus consciousness as fundamental. Think about the self being an illusion or the self being actually real. Think about God existing as some actual reality in the form of beingness, or God is just merely a concept that we humans have constructed. Or you can also think about a contradiction that goes like, life is inherently meaningless, yet every day I exist and create meaning in my life. Or wondering if the meaning that you create in your life is just a projection or actually part of existence itself. I can go through many of these examples and to list them all and then tell you they are actually all the same and the problem doesn't exist must feel extremely dismissive if you do not fully believe or have integrated non-dual teachings. Like, how is this supposed to work? It is just defying logic. I would argue that the logic still holds, but you must be able to see that the contradiction only exists in your mind. The contradictions here are not real at all. For example, a cup can be half empty and a cup can be half full. Now, this is clearly true at the same time because it just depends on how you define the cup. Reality can both be a tiger and a lion, and all it requires are different positions. What we try to do when we use philosophy is that we are trying to collapse the position as if one true philosophy could win over others, when all what philosophy is actually doing is pointing at the facet of truth. Free will points to the facet of perceived agency in the present moment experience and the awareness manipulating and changing the outcome of an action. If you look at what awareness does, it reflects and thinks about a choice. And then from there, you make it pick the choice. And now you can say, okay, but this is not actually free will. This is deterministic, or this is because of cause and effect. And now you can argue the cause and effect side of things and find some sort of actual deterministic sort of materialism. But then you might also argue, okay, but where does this chain of cause and effect start? Was it at the beginning of the Big Bang? Was it a God that created itself? Was it just consciousness being itself? Like, where does the actual chain of cause and effect start? Is there even time in the first place? And if there is no time in the first place, then isn't everything just spontaneously arising out of nothing? In all philosophical debates, if you're very sophisticated, you should be able to steelman each position. And if you do this often enough, you will find out that multiple positions can be true at the same time. Because the moment you use language to describe the nature of reality, you will always struggle to not contradict yourself. Because reality is inherently contradictory. Non-duality means that there are not two things. Everything is one thing. So the moment you try to put a label onto reality and you say reality is deterministic or morality is objective, now you're saying that reality is defined in this way and not to its opposite. But in this moment, you're actually pretending that the opposite doesn't exist. The opposite though must exist, or you couldn't even talk about the cognitive dissonance. So if you say that morality is clearly subjective and nothing really matters because there's no real objective metric for morality, then this is the truth that you're going to live. And this is the experience of existence you're going to have. But if you're a fundamentalist Christian and you believe that morality is objective and given by God, and therefore there are things that are objectively wrong or objectively right, then this is the reality that this person is going to live. And now you want to say, okay, but what is actually real? This or the other? But they are both made up human experiences. If there were no humans in the equation, none of them were right. Because none of it is real. It's all coming from the ground up. It is meaning imagined by the fact of being yourself. Is meaning something you experience inherently, like what you experience as meaningful is actually meaningful, or meaning is just a projection of the own mind? Now it's both. It can be both a projection of your own mind, where there's nothing actually there, but by the act of projecting, you create genuine meaning. And since all what reality does is this act of projection, now you can also argue that meaning is inherent. Another idea is the idea of materialism or consciousness. Like reality is fundamentally materialistic, and there's no such thing as a universal consciousness, and all is just atoms. And you might also say, no. Reality is clearly in a giant mind, and everything is made out of consciousness. And material reality is not the actual reality. It's kind of an illusion that we create. Now, can you see how both of them can be true at the same time, and that the real distinction only exists within language? Because on one hand, there is just material and physics that actually governs how this world functions. But there's also clearly a conscious aspect that determines how we perceive physics. And if you keep going into this rabbit hole, you start to notice that you cannot actually define anything but consciousness. You will end up at the point where you have to admit that no matter what concept you use, no matter what words you use to describe something, you are always interfacing with your own conscious awareness. And your own conscious awareness, in its essence, doesn't use words. It doesn't need words. It is precisely defined by the experience of any given moment. And the moment you're starting to wonder, is this free will or is this determinism, you're putting a layer on top of reality that is imaginary. And it's so difficult for people to understand that it can both be imaginary and also real. It's like a hallucination or a hologram. You can look at a hallucination and say it is not real because it is just an hallucination. But then you must also account for the fact that the hallucination is real, or there would be nothing to talk about. The same with the idea that the entire universe is infinite imagination. Like infinite consciousness is infinite imagination. So all of this reality is just a construction made by the human mind, and none of it is actually true. Fair. Makes complete sense, right? If we all just prediction engines and constructing this experience, and beyond our own physical bodies, our own brains, there's nothing beyond, there's just this physical experience, then yeah, it makes sense to call everything a hallucination or an imagination. But then if everything is already imagination, then there is no imagination and it's all reality. The same with everything and nothing. If reality is everything, it is indistinguishable from nothing, because there's nothing outside of it. There's nothing there to control it. That's also where the free will and determinism illusion breaks down. Because at the end, all you're seeing is movement. And because you can't control the movement, you're saying that there's no free will. And often this is a sort of realization about the nature of the ego, trying to claim happenings as its own merit. And this egoic sense of freedom, or this egoic sense of ownership and doership, is an illusion. It's not real. And then often you can say, okay, free will doesn't exist. I'm deterministic now. And it is kind of a higher development of your own awareness or of your own consciousness, because you're transcending the egoic delusion. But then after time, you might have to go back to free will again, because you notice, okay, just completely abdicating all of my responsibility and abdicating my ability to influence my life is kind of a place where my ego is starting to feel comfortable, and I don't have to put myself out there, and I don't have to challenge myself, and I don't have to investigate new forms of understanding my own existence and what I want from this life. And hey, I'm aware of this right now. I wasn't aware of this before. Now I feel more inclined to do something about it. Maybe this is what freedom is all about. And yeah, this is how the pendulum swings. And if you want to intellectually awaken, then you need to be able to list out all of the contradictions in your mind that you have not wrestled with, and then really think about what is true about each. And it's okay to not relativize everything into non-duality at first. It's completely fine to be a determinist or a free willist, or believing in objective morality or subjective morality. Having these positions is fine, but then willingly proving yourself not just wrong, but proving the other side right is what collapses this need to be attached to belief systems and to be attached to a certain reality model. Because all what you're really doing when you're investigating the nature of your ego is going to the bedrock of how your own mind creates your own internal reality model. And it always does so with multiple layers of belief systems and thoughts and ideas in mind. And then it creates boxes with certain things are deemed impossible. And as long as something is categorized as impossible, your ego never has to actually put an effort to change this perception. This can be for belief systems you hold, but it can also be for something stupidly simple, like a goal that you have and you're thinking it's never going to happen. So you don't even consider the fact that it might be possible. The sense that things are impossible is where you don't even question it anymore, and you lose the awareness that could make it possible in the first place. This is where the manifestation crowd comes in and says that the beliefs build your reality. But it's true. If you don't believe something is possible, then this is what you're going to see. And if you believe something is possible, then it's more likely that you're going to see that. Now, do you believe it is possible that multiple things can be true at the same time? I'm interrupting the current transmission for the following message. If you know that what I'm saying is true, and you want to figure out where in your own belief systems you're getting stuck because you cannot fathom how the opposite can be true, or how you could be wrong in a certain belief structure that you're currently in, and you notice that it is limiting you and also causing you just discomfort, then check out my Ego Architecture Audit in the link in the description. Now, since I've already contradicted myself endlessly in this video, let's contradict myself to completion. Because what it seems like is that I'm being very nihilistic, because I'm saying, kind of both are true, and it's like not having an actual position on anything. But if you have seen my videos, this is not actually the case. I have position on things, right? Like I'm not making these videos because there's no truth to be pointed at. And this is what is so incredible about existence. And it's that truth is shining everywhere. There's truth all the time in all shapes and forms. But it is the ego mechanism that blinds you to what is actually going on, especially in your own psyche, and how your psyche then projects your image of the world. Because all this philosophy and existential searching is really just trying to dig a hole into your own brain and trying to figure out if you can dig a hole deep enough so you can actually go to the bedrock of reality. And spoiler, yes, it actually works. It actually works because the human is never separated from reality. The idea that your perceptions on your sense data blocks you out from seeing the true nature is also an illusion. Because as far as you're concerned, the reality that you're inhabiting is the direct contact with sensations. Whenever you imagine a reality that doesn't include your own experience of sensations, then it's like believing in a god again, without any evidence, because all you actually have is your sense data. Now, I am still claiming some sort of indirect realism. Like, I'm not saying that just because you see the color red, that out there actually exists the color red. But here again, the paradox, right? The color red is clearly real. It clearly exists. But there's no red there on the other side. And the human just sees a tiny part of the light spectrum. And this is then what we perceive as red. But there's clearly no contradiction here. There's just perception creating reality. But the reality is actually created. And now what the human does, it filters so much of the actual perceptions through their own mental philosophy or like belief systems and egoic ideas about why you matter more than others and why what you think is more important. And a lot of it is also fueled by doubt. If you are very intellectually rigorous and you're interested in all of these topics, then the natural response to most of the stuff is to just be always doubtful and to be uncertain. Because as long as you're uncertain, you can't be wrong. But then uncertainty is also kind of the way to not collapse the dualities. Because if you're uncertain, you never have to commit to any position. But if you're certain, you just know, okay, this is true. And when one thing is true, you do collapse the duality at the end of the day. Which is kind of, again, paradoxical to all what I've been saying, because what I'm saying is that multiple things can be true at the same time, which is kind of the point. But to be very clear, truth exists. And truth can be as simple as, this is a hand. Now, is this a social construction? Is it defined by me? Is it defined by you? Is it your eyesight? Did you just listen to the video and not actually look at my hand? So maybe I showed you something else. All of this starts to be interpretation on top of something that was actually quite direct and simple. And this is how truth really behaves. Truth is very simple. But if you go towards existential truth and the nature of physical existence or the ultimate nature of reality, what you will do is you will deconstruct your human psyche, and you will have to keep digging into your brain and keep excavating all of the stuff within your psyche, and then from there start to uncover what is true about yourself and about reality. And you do so by deconstructing belief systems, and by deconstructing belief systems, you end up in this sort of awakened headspace where you realize, okay, I don't need to be identified with any word. Like, I don't need to be identified with any belief system. I don't need to believe in anything, because the belief is kind of like what goes on top of stuff you're uncertain about. But when you know something to be the case, it is not a question of belief. It's just known. And if you truly are awakened to the nature of the ego or the self, then this knowing is not something that you are identified with. It is just something that you are. There's no believing in things while not being identified with them to some degree. Like most people who believe in stuff, it is not just an idea in their head, but it is part of them. And that's why it's so uncomfortable to deconstruct it, because now this part of you suddenly is not you anymore, and you wonder, okay, what the hell am I then? And you do this often enough until there's no you of you left, or the real you is what is left.